Good evening. Oh, you're a beautiful group. You're just beautiful and handsome. I want to apologize for coming in a little late. We just completed a series of votes. But I'm delighted and very, very pleased to be here. My friend and my brother, thank you for those kind words of introduction. Julian Bond, my friend, thank you for being here. And thank each and every one of you for being here. It's good to be here at Politics and Prose again. I remember when I was here in June of '98, it was raining and storming. Then I went to Atlanta and it was raining and storming. And I told the wind story, walking with the wind. But tonight I'm not going to tell the wind story. Now, many of you realize or know from my past that I grew up on a farm in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4, how many of you remember when you were 4? What happened to the rest of us? Well, with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. And on this land, we raised a lot of cotton and corn, peanuts, hogs, cows, and chickens. It was my responsibility to care for the chickens. And I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else could raise chicken. I became very good at raising chickens. Those chickens taught me something long before I got involved in the civil rights movement. They taught me patience. They taught me to wait. They taught me to never give up and never give in, that if I set those setting hen with fresh eggs, in 3 weeks, I would have some little chicks. But the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence that I came to embrace when I was only about 18 years old. Back in 1955, at the age of 15, I've heard of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. I heard Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speaking on the old radio, talking about nonviolence and passive resistance. As a young person, I started studying the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence, to lay down the burden of bitterness, the burden of hate, and try to move toward that sense of community, that sense of one family, one people, one house. In this little book, Across That Bridge, I try to suggest that there's a better way. There's a better example of moving toward a sense of community, not just the American community, but the world community. What is faith all about? It's in keeping with the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence, to believe somehow in some way that you're going to succeed, that you're going to overcome. But you have to be persistent and you have to insist. You have to be like a tree planted by the rivers of waters, that you're anchored, that you may be beaten, you may get arrested, you may go to jail over and over again. But you have to keep the faith. Keep your eyes on the prize. And never, ever give up. Never give in or out. Before we went on any sit-in, any march, before we went on the Freedom Rides in 1961, the same year that President Barack Obama was born, we studied, we prepared ourselves. I came to Washington, D.C. the first time in May of 1961. 13 of us, blacks and whites, preparing to go on the Freedom Ride. We met right here in Washington, D.C. I was 21 years old. I had all of my hair, and I was a few pounds lighter. We studied. We prepared ourselves. The night of May 3rd, 1961, we went down to a Chinese restaurant right here in Washington, D.C. for a meal. Growing up in rural Alabama, attending school in Nashville, I've never been to a Chinese restaurant, never had the food. But that night of May 3rd, someone said, you should eat well, because this may be like the Last Supper. On May 4th, 1961, we boarded a Greyhound bus. Some boarded a Trailway bus and traveled from Washington through Virginia, through North Carolina. We arrived in a little town called Rock Hill, South Carolina. We were attacked and beaten and left bloody. But one of the same young men that attacked and beat me and my seatmate came to my office in February of 2009 and said, Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the people that attacked and beat you. I want to apologize. Will you forgive me? His 48-year-old son was with him, who had been encouraging his father to seek out the people that he had attacked. He started crying. The father started crying. They both gave me a hug, and I started crying. This book speaks about reconciliation, the ability, the capacity to be reconciled, to move toward community. That if you believe in something, you should speak up, speak out, you should stand up, and you should fight for it. You have to be consistent. You have to insist on the truth. Nothing, not one thing is stronger than the truth. There may be some setbacks, there may be some disappointment, but in the long scheme of things, you're going to win. You're going to succeed. The way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence, the way of truth will win out. This book is suggesting, whether it's in the Middle East, in Africa, in America, or any part of this little planet, this little piece of real estate that we call the Earth, that we can, as Dr. King suggested, learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will perish as fools. Gandhi put it another way. It is nonviolence or non-existence. It is my hope that young people and people not so young will use across that bridge to find a way to get in the way, to find a way to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble, and disturb the order of things. When I was growing up, my mother and my father, my grandparents and great-grandparents would say, don't get in trouble, don't get in the way. And through study, through listening, through being patient, I got in trouble, good trouble and necessary trouble. And I feel that it's time for the American people to get in trouble again, good trouble. As a people and as a nation, we're too quiet. We need to make some noise. We need to push and pull and do what we can to redeem the soul of America and save this little planet, not just the American community, Let's save this planet for generation yet unborn. I happen to believe